Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to another mod with me. So today we're going to be modifying the Spiritsong Tarot, and I'm going to be taking some of the edges off. So the reason I'm going to be taking the border off this particular deck is not so much because I dislike the border, because I really don't mind it at all. I like that if you look here, you can see all the cards have a slightly different border, and I think that's actually quite pretty. But my problem with this deck is that it's larger than a standard tarot size, and so it is a bit difficult for me to get my hands around to shuffle. So you can see here, it's a stretch and it's uncomfortable, and that means that I don't get a very good shuffle. And as I've mentioned before in other videos, shuffling is very much a part of a ritualistic kind of part of my reading practice. And so when I can't shuffle the deck in a way that really works for me, then it's hard for me to really connect with that deck during that part of my reading process. So when this becomes a struggle like this, it just makes it hard for me to connect with the cards. And I really like these cards, and I really have enjoyed the readings that I've done with this deck, but it's just a little bit too large for me to shuffle. I am a bit sad that I'm going to be kind of cutting off all these wonderful colors, but I am going to leave the titles on the bottom. That's kind of my plan for this deck and why I am going to be modifying it today. So let's go ahead and get started. So before we get into trimming the Spiritsong Tarot, let's touch on real quick the supplies that I'll be using. I have my Fisker's trimmer here, and you will find links for most of the products that I show in this video in the description box below. I have my little triangle ruler so that I can make a nice guard for my cards to sit up against, and I have my washi tape to tape that down. I also have my regular ruler because the thickness of this is the same as the space between the guard and the blade, so I can tell exactly where my blade's coming down. And of course I have my Katamaro Pro corner rounder with the 3 different sizes. So these are kind of the tools that I use every time I trim a deck, and I found that they work really well for me. So let's go ahead and get started on the process and move some of this stuff out of the way. So the first thing that we're going to do is figure out which side we want to cut first and set the measurements for that. So for this particular deck, as I'd mentioned, I'm going to be taking off the top and the 2 sides, and then I'm going to be trimming a sliver off the bottom just to even that space up, because that's going to drive my OCD brain crazy, I think, but we will do that side last just to be sure. And so I think what we're going to do is start with the top. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top here, and we're going to trim this off first. And basically what I'm going to be doing is using my ruler over here. Now this deck is quite large, so it actually goes past my little guard up here, so that might cause me some issues in the end. I could also take a little extra off the top just to make this deck a little bit smaller. And so maybe what I want to do is find a deck that I like the size of it and try to maybe use that somewhat as my measurements. So this is my Maiden Oracle, and you can see here, like, this is more standard tarot size. So you can see here there's quite a bit of a difference. I think once I cut this off and I cut a sliver off down at the bottom, it's going to get really close to that this size, so I think I'll be good there. So what I'm going to do is go just a little bit to the inside of that black line just to make sure that I'm cutting it off, and you know, it gets a little bit more of a sliver off the deck. And here's where my little ruler comes in handy, where I can use it to check where my blade is going to come down. And so right there puts me just on the inside of my line. And I'm going to just pop that down there to keep my card in place while I set my ruler. Now setting this ruler up over here basically means that I'm going to create a guard on this side. So we have a guard on this side, and we kind of have a guard on this side, but there's no guard over here to keep the deck from sliding or to keep the card from jumping that way when my blade goes through it. So by using this little ruler here, I'm able to basically create like just a little guard on the other side. And get my washi back up. Make sure that is in there. So it is just to the other side of the 4.5 inch line. So by the time I actually cut some off of this, it's going to be a much smaller deck. Now I am, like I said, just on the inside of this black line. So I'm going to take a quick peek just to make sure. I don't think there is any text at the top of this deck. There is not, so I won't be cutting off anything important there. So that's butted up against there, that's here. I'm gonna do one more check with my ruler. And I'm gonna make my first cut. Ooh, and I got the copyright off the back. Always a bonus when that happens. So you can see here, I cut a little bit into that imagery, but again, I'm okay with that because it makes the card smaller. And I also got rid of the copyright, which is always a bonus. So I'm gonna finish trimming off the top of the deck and then we'll check back in and get things reset for the sides. So with this card in place, it took me about 5, maybe 7 minutes to cut the tops off all 78 cards. And you can see here when I line them up, it got it pretty dang straight. They are all pretty close to even. Here you can see the tops, and you can just see the tops of the artwork now. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and trim the sides. So basically this is just repeat the same process. It is pull my guard up and get my card going in here. Put that down, always making sure that my washi is not getting in the way. So always wanna check my top and bottom to make sure they are in place. Make sure that's lined up really well, and we can use our ruler to check that because I can look and see how much of the card is showing on this side. I think that should be good. I think. So let's go ahead and do our first cut. I can always make a few minor adjustments if I need. Didn't quite get that black line down at the bottom, but that's okay. I'm pretty close to it. So let's just do one more just to check before we start really working our way through the cards. That one was better. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish trimming off the sides of this deck. I'm gonna do both sides and then we'll come and check back in and we'll deal with the bottom. Okay, I just wanted to pop in real quick because I did want to show you that if your first measurement isn't quite working out for you, you can go ahead and change it and they will still cut at the same measurements. So, or it will still line up well as long as you're always going with the same measurements. So basically what happened was the printing is slightly, you know, just there are slight variations from card to card. So in some of the cards, I wasn't quite getting right up to that, to the artwork. And sometimes I was. So it was kind of, you know, it was just enough of a shift to kind of make me go, oh, I don't like that. So basically what I did is I realigned the card. This was the first one that I did. And I moved my ruler over. And now each card I'm slipping back in here and I'm taking off that little sliver. That's the difference between my first measurement and this measurement that I'm using now. And I just want to show you that if you know, after a couple cards, you're realizing that where the artwork sits on the card varies a little bit and you want to move in just a tiny bit more just to kind of compensate for that, you can do that. And then these cards will still end up the same size because even when I get through these ones that I already cut the right side off, when I go to cut these ones, I'm still cutting at the same measurements, right? So I should be good either way. So you can see here that even though I trimmed this one twice and trimmed this one only once, because I'm using the same measurement, they came out the exact same size. So I just wanted to pop in real quick as I was going through this process and just share with you that, yep, sometimes those measurements aren't quite right, and so you want to make those adjustments, and you totally can. Just make sure that you're always trimming all the cards on the same side, all at the same measurements. So that's what gets that uniform, you know, look, that really straight edge, and that really helps with shuffling as well, because that's what we need for a deck to shuffle well. provided it has decent cardstock and it shuffles okay to begin with. Trimming a deck won't necessarily fix bad cardstock. That just is what it is sometimes. But by always using the same measurement and only cutting one side at a time, I can make those small adjustments, and as long as I'm making them to all the cards, it will end up working out to them all being the same size regardless. So I just wanted to pop in and share with that. Okay, I'm gonna get back to trimming. Okay, so I got all the sides and the top cut off. You can see it came out pretty dang straight. Now I'm gonna go ahead and trim a little bit off the bottom, and one of the reasons that I'm going to do it is because, yeah, it kind of drives my brain a little bit crazy to have all this white space at the bottom or all this extra space. But I think if I trim just a little bit off to this line right here, I'll also get that other copyright off. And since I'm going to trim it anyway, I figured, you know, we might as well just give it a shot. So let's see how it goes. So what I'm going to do is put it in here and line it up first where I think I want it. Once I get that lined up in there, I'm just going to double check it with my ruler. Okay. And then I'm going to double check the back just to see if I'm far enough, and I can tell you right now I'm not. So if I want that copyright off, have to go down a little bit more. So I need to go right here. Okay, so if I go right there, that gets me my copyright off. But what's it going to do to the front side? That's my concern. It's going to take that line off. Do I care if it takes the line off? I really don't think I do. I think it'll be fine without the line. The words are all close enough, so that'll just get me that. Otherwise I'm going to end up cropping into the copyright, which I think is going to look weirder than me just cutting the line off. So this is what we're going with. Which, as you can see, maintains that line down at the bottom, but now I've pretty much cut into my copyright, which I think looks weirder than if I just cut it off. So, but just to see, because we can always cut more off, we can't put it back. So if we're gonna try something like that, now is the time to do it. So I just want to double check again that I am cropping that right where I want. I think that should get me with that copyright off. And it did, but as you can see, it's leaving some weird dotted line down at the bottom. So guess what? We're gonna scoot it even a little further because we can do that. Double check, because I don't want to cut my keywords off at the bottom because I actually like those. Okay, so there, that's a little bit better. That gets that weird little, I just had a little hint of that dotted line, this dotted line down here peeking out, and it was just kind of a little bit weird. So I'm going to finish up trimming this deck and corner rounding it, and then we will go ahead and get color on the edges. Because I trimmed it, I always like to edge the deck with colors when I'm done. Okay, so I got the deck all trimmed and cornered around it. You can see it looks really cool. I actually really like it like this. I think it's a much easier size to work with, and I think I'm really going to enjoy it now. So I did a little bit of kind of comparing with the different colors, trying to find a couple of good color matches. You can see here I did a couple of swatches. These were Crayola marker. They were just far too bright for what I wanted. I wanted something a little bit more pastel. And being that I can't go out and get more ink right now, I decided to go with the ones that I have. So I decided to basically divide the deck into 3 different color palettes based on the color on the bottom, and I got as close as I could. So I have all of the various green shades here that are going to be done in the shabby shutters. I have all of the kind of gray, purple, blues in this pile for the milled lavender, and then I have all of the kind of beigey tone ones, pink beigey tone ones in this pile for the antique linen. And I did also do just a little test on each on these little slivers that I cut, and I think it's going to be okay. I think that the green might be a little bit darker than I want, but we're going to go ahead and roll with it because, like I said, I can't go get more, and this is what I have, so we're going with it. So I'm going to go ahead and edge each of these piles, and then we'll come back and take a look at the finished product. So I have finished the trimming and the edging of the Spiritsong Tarot, and I divided the deck into 3 different color piles based on the bottom of the card. So I kind of put all of the blue, purple, gray colors together, all of the kind of pinky yellow ones, and all of the sort of green hued ones together. And then I edged this pile in the Distressed Ink Milled Lavender. I edged this one in the Antique Linen and this one in the Shabby Shutters. So here is the pile of purpley cards, and look how great they look trimmed. I'm really happy with how this deck came out. I love that I took the time to take that excess off the bottom because it took the copyright off the bottom. So you can see I no longer have a copyright on either side of my deck. And it also helped create these curves ended up in where my corner punch was punching in. So I think it makes it look really nice and really finished to just, you know, spend that little extra time, take that little bit off the bottom, and just, you know, give it that little extra attention to detail. So here is the deck edged in the milled lavender, which I think looks really pretty. I went with very soft pastel colors. I mean, it really doesn't even pick up on the sides, which is totally fine. I think it matches the deck beautifully. So here is my antique linen pile. And again, these are all cards that had a kind of beigey, yellowy color palette, a couple of little pinks in there. I did try to keep the piles fairly balanced so that when I mix these cards together, I don't get like a huge chunk of one color over the other. So there are a few of them that are like a little more green toned because the green pile was really big to start with. And so I kind of moved some of them around just so that I could get those in there where I wanted them. I think they look amazing like this, and hopefully this will show up on camera. And they have this lovely yellow, very muted yellow color, which actually matches the backs really well. I think this whole deck would have looked gorgeous in the antique linen all by itself, but I do really like the mix of colors because this is a very colorful deck. It's very pastel, but it's very colorful. And so here's all the cards edged in the Shabby Shutters. This is one of my favorite green colors to use. And this, I guess, and I think that the deck would have looked really great edged in any one of these single colors, but I think to edge them all in the 3 different colors is going to be really pretty. So there is that one. You can see here. I'm really pleased with the way that these came out. I think the deck looks amazing trimmed like this. Again, I love that had that attention to detail to take the bit off the bottom. Here's all 3 of them together. So we have the purple, the yellow, and the green, which I think looks really lovely. Probably could have saw them better if I put the purple in the middle, but they are all very pastel, which was exactly what I was hoping for. I can get my hand around these better now. So that's really was my key. Look, I can actually get my hand around it without stretching, without hurting is really the key there. So let's see how it shuffles. This is that US Games kind of a little bit cardboardy cardstock. I mean, I don't mind it at all. I think it holds up beautifully and it shuffles pretty well. So I think it's a nice cardstock, but it does mean that it kind of takes a little bit to work it in. And I can tell you right now that these colors together are looking amazing. So you can see I'm definitely still getting some clumping, but I think that's more due to the cardstock and the fact that this is a newer deck than really that is because of the size, because I am able to get my hand around it now. So now that we have shuffled it, let's pull it in and look. Look at that variegation. That is just gorgeous. I think that matches beautifully with these cards. How pretty is that? So that is by far kind of, I think, one of my favorite mods that I've done so far. Probably because at this point I'm quite smitten with this deck anyway. And so to have it be something that I can a little bit easier get my hand around is wonderful. The Two of Acorns is flying out at us. Oh, let's take a look here because I don't have, this didn't come with an extra card, so I can't really like do a size comparison. But here's the book that was basically the same size as the card. So you can see here that I took off quite a bit around the sides and the top. So I think that it's still going to work in its box just fine, because even though I took it off, like it's still, you know, it's going to rattle around in there a little bit, but I think it'll be okay. I might end up making a bag for it if I find some fabric that I really like. But I do tend to kind of turn to this guidebook, so I might end up keeping it in the box just so I can keep the guidebook with it, because this guidebook I've actually found to be really handy, especially as working with animal energy is something that's fairly new for me. So let's just pull a couple cards just so we can see how they look together. I was a bit concerned about they would be too busy, like if we stack them up together. But I think they kind of read like a story. I kind of like that. It makes for a lovely storybook image. I think that that's really beautiful. After doing this, I think I'm really ready to do my Paulina now, because the busyness of the artwork was kind of what was holding me back, because I'd heard some people say that it was too busy to do this with, but I think it actually works. I mean, I could see if you had like 20 cards on the table that it might be a little much. But, you know, I don't do huge readings like that very often. And I don't really think that this would be a deck I'd be inclined to do super huge readings with. So, but let's just lay down like 8 cards, because that's a pretty good size reading anyway. But even with that, I think that they do work. And of course, you know, we could space them out. We don't have to, you know, like butt them all up against each other. And that definitely, you know, provides some space. You can always use your table, your setting to provide that space if you need as well. But I do like that when you put them all together, it kind of reads like a story. That's kind of pretty. Anyway, I'm just sitting here playing with them now. But I'm super pleased with the way that this one came out. This really is kind of what I envisioned for this deck, and I think it just looks beautiful. I think it works really well for this deck, and I love that the little spirals ended up down in my corners. That's just, you know, talking about those measurements and taking that little extra time for that, paying attention to the details. Sometimes it can make all the difference in the world. And yes, it's totally just an aesthetic thing, because it really wouldn't matter to the use of the deck whether I'd left that extra on there or not. But I think that it looks really nice and tight and polished this way. And I do have to say that I love the colors that, these 3 colors that they showed up on the side of the cards. I think they look absolutely beautiful. So I'm super pleased with this. I think it came out great. Thank you for joining me for this mod with me. You'll find links for the decks and products that I've used in this video in the description box below. I hope you enjoyed this process and will join me again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.